A cruel millionaire hangs a tied-up horse on a cliff for a horrible reason. Every minute, the worn-out ropes threaten to break over the deadly abyss. But what happens next is something no one could ever imagine, something that would leave everyone in shock. Before we dive in, if you, like us, are animal lovers, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any heartwarming stories. Thanks. Let's get back to our story. Golden dust danced in the afternoon air as Thunderbolt's hooves thundered across the track. The magnificent black horse, with his glossy mane rippling in the wind, seemed to float above the ground of the regional racetrack. Ridden by Pete O'Connell, a man with a face weathered by the sun and hands calloused by work, the animal displayed a perfect harmony with his owner. From the VIP box, Victor Manning watched the scene with eyes bloodshot with hatred, his fingers squeezing the gilded railing so hard that the knuckles turned white. The announcer could barely contain his excitement. And here comes Thunderbolt, ladies and gentlemen. For the third time in a row, Pete O'Connell and his extraordinary horse are about to make history at the regional championship. The crowd roared, and among the spectators a girl with brown braids jumped for joy. Lisa, with her 12 years, grinned from ear to ear, proud of her father and the horse that she herself had helped raise since he was a foal. When Thunderbolt crossed the finish line, the stadium erupted in applause. Pete dismounted with grace and was immediately embraced by Lisa, who ran onto the track. "Dad, you guys were amazing!" The girl stroked Thunderbolt's muzzle, who neighed softly in response. The moment of celebration, however, was briefly interrupted by the approach of firm and calculated steps. Victor Manning, impeccable in his Italian suit, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations, O'Connell," he said, extending his hand. "How about we celebrate by discussing a new price for Thunderbolt? Let's say, double my last offer?" Pete shook the offered hand firmly, but his eyes remained cold. "I'm sorry, Mr. Manning, but Thunderbolt is not for sale, at any price." Lisa noticed the tension in the air, observing the way Victor's eyebrows twitched slightly. She knew that expression. It was the same one he had years ago when her father still worked on his ranch. The girl instinctively moved closer to Thunderbolt, as if she wanted to protect him. Reporter Mary Smith, known for her investigative reports, approached with her microphone and camera. "Mr. O'Connell, what a historic moment. 3 consecutive wins with Thunderbolt. Can you tell us the secret of this extraordinary partnership?" Victor stepped back a few paces, his presence momentarily forgotten as the camera flashes captured Pete's moment of glory. "The secret is mutual respect and hard work, Mary," replied Pete, stroking Thunderbolt's neck. "This horse is not just a competition animal, he's part of our family." Lisa smiled upon hearing those words, remembering the mornings when she woke up early to help care for Thunderbolt, the stories she told him in the stable, the secrets that only the horse knew. On the other side of the track, Victor watched the scene with a calculating look. His fingers drummed on the silver-handled cane he always carried, a gift from his father that symbolized the agribusiness empire they built, not always by the most honest means. He made a discreet gesture, and one of the waiters serving champagne in the VIP area nodded almost imperceptibly. The celebration continued as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange. Pete received congratulations from other competitors and admirers, always with his characteristic humility. Lisa stuck close to Thunderbolt, helping to prepare the horse for his well-deserved rest after the competition. Mary Smith continued to hang around, taking notes in her pad. Her keen eyes alternated between the celebration and the shadowy figure of Victor Manning, who was talking quietly with his aides. There was something in the businessman's expression that intrigued her, awakening her journalistic instinct. The waiter approached Pete with a special glass of champagne. "Compliments of Mr. Manning to celebrate your historic victory," he said with a practiced smile. Pete, though reluctant, accepted the glass. It would be rude to refuse completely. He didn't notice the strange glint of the liquid, nor the way the waiter hurried away. Meanwhile, in the growing shadows of the stable, Lisa finished settling Thunderbolt, whispering words of affection to the horse. "You're the best horse in the world, you know," she said, offering him a carrot. "And no one will ever separate us." Little did the girl know that her words would be tested very soon in a way she could never imagine. Twilight had already given way to night when Pete felt the first dizziness. He was talking to some horse breeders when his voice began to fail and the world around him seemed to spin. Mary Smith, who was still lingering around doing her reporting, was the first to notice that something was wrong. "Mr. O'Connell, are you okay?" asked the journalist, approaching quickly when she saw Pete stagger. He tried to answer, but the words jumbled in his tongue. The champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers, shattering on the stone floor of the club. Lisa, who was returning from the stable, heard the commotion and ran towards her father. Dad, what's wrong?" Her childish voice was full of concern as she saw Pete being supported by two men to keep from falling. His eyes, normally so lively and attentive, were unfocused and half-closed. "Call an ambulance," shouted Mary, taking control of the situation as she held Pete's arm. On the other side of the room, Victor Manning watched the scene with a discreet smile hidden behind his own glass of champagne. His eyes met those of the waiter who had served the tainted drink, and an imperceptible nod was exchanged between them. In minutes, the celebration party turned into controlled chaos. The sound of the ambulance siren cut through the night, and paramedics rushed into the club. Lisa held her father's hand, silent tears streaming down her face as the health professionals examined him and placed him on the stretcher. "I want to go with him," Lisa insisted when they started taking Pete to the ambulance. Mary placed her hand on her shoulder gently. "I'll take you to the hospital, honey. We'll follow the ambulance in my car." The girl nodded, grateful for the presence of the journalist who, even though she had only met her father that afternoon, showed genuine concern. Before leaving, Lisa cast one last look towards the stable where Thunderbolt was resting. "But what about Thunderbolt? I can't leave him alone." Mary smiled understandingly. "The club's handler will take care of him tonight. Your dad needs you more right now." What none of them knew was that, in the shadows of the parking lot, three men waited in a black pickup truck, watching the ambulance leave. Victor approached the vehicle, his silver-handled cane reflecting the light of the lampposts. "Wait 15 minutes and then do what we discussed. No witnesses, no trace." As Mary's car followed the ambulance down the road leading to the city hospital, Lisa couldn't contain her anguish. "He's going to be okay, isn't he?" she asked, her voice small in the silence of the car. Mary gripped the steering wheel, choosing her words carefully. "The doctors are going to take very good care of him, I'm sure." The journalist, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this situation. In her years of investigative reporting, she had developed a sixth sense for stories that didn't quite add up. Pete's sudden collapse, Victor Manning's constant presence, the waiter who had mysteriously disappeared. There were missing pieces in this puzzle. At the hospital, doctors and nurses moved quickly around Pete, who was now completely unconscious. Lisa was forced to wait in the waiting room, her small hands clutching a glass of water she barely touched. Mary remained by her side, making discreet notes in her pad while observing the activity of the hospital. Back at the horse club, now practically deserted, the black pickup truck approached the stable silently. The handler hired to watch the horses overnight was lying in a corner, knocked out by a well-aimed blow. Three men in black moved like shadows among the stalls. Thunderbolt, sensing the strange presence, began to stir in his stall. One of the men approached with a special rope, whispering false words of comfort. The magnificent black horse, still wearing the champion's garland, tried to back away, but the confined space of the stall limited him. "Quick and quiet," whispered the leader of the group, checking once again that there were no witnesses. "The boss wants this taken care of before dawn." With precise and well-rehearsed movements, they managed to overpower Thunderbolt, tying his muzzle to prevent alarm neighs. In the hospital waiting room, Lisa felt a sudden chill run down her spine. Something in her heart said that it wasn't just her father who was in danger that night. Without knowing why, her thoughts turned to Thunderbolt, and a sense of urgency began to grow in her chest. Lisa couldn't sit still in the hospital waiting room. The feeling that something terrible was happening only increased with each passing minute. Mary had stepped out momentarily to make a few calls, leaving the girl alone with her restless thoughts. That's when she overheard, by chance, the conversation of two nurses passing by in the hallway. "That's a strong sedative they gave the rancher," commented one of them. "From what the doctors said, he'll be unconscious until tomorrow at the earliest." The other nurse shook his head. "Strange thing to happen right after the competition, isn't it?" Those words made Lisa sit up straight in the plastic chair. Her father wasn't just sick, someone had done this to him on purpose. And there was only one person who would have a reason to want her father out of the way that night. The image of Victor Manning's cold smile flashed in her mind. Without a second thought, Lisa grabbed her backpack and quietly left the hospital. She knew the way back to the horse club well. How many times hadn't she made that journey with her father? The streets were deserted at that time of night, lit only by the lampposts that cast long shadows on the asphalt. As she walked hurriedly, Lisa took out her cell phone, a birthday present she had received the previous month. The battery was at 20%, but that would be enough to call for help if she needed it. She thought about calling Mary, but something made her hesitate. What if she was wrong? What if it was just her imagination? The horse club was plunged into shadows when she finally arrived. Immediately, Lisa realized that something was wrong. The handler's pickup truck, which should have been parked in front of the stable, wasn't there. In its place, fresh tire tracks cut through the dirt. With her heart pounding, she approached the stable, staying in the shadows as her father had taught her during their games of hide and seek. The silence was disturbing. Normally, there would be the soft sound of horses moving in their stalls, snorting or stomping their hooves, but now there was only a heavy silence. When she reached the stable door, Lisa found the handler lying on the ground, a bump forming on his forehead. He was breathing normally, but he was completely out cold. With trembling hands, she ran to Thunderbolt's stall, only to find it empty. The champion's garland was lying on the floor, trampled. Tears began to blur her vision, but Lisa wiped them away forcefully. It wasn't time to cry, she needed to think. Where would they have taken Thunderbolt? That's when she heard the distant sound of an engine. Leaving the stable, she saw headlight beams moving towards the cliff that marked the edge of the land. The cliff, the place her father always told her never to approach alone. 100-foot drop straight onto the rocks below. Why would they be taking Thunderbolt there in the middle of the night? The answer made her blood run cold. Determined, Lisa began to run along the trail she knew like the back of her hand. While her father took care of the horses, she used to explore every inch of that land, discovering shortcuts and secret passages among the rocks. Now, that knowledge could save Thunderbolt's life. The trail she chose climbed along the side of the mountain, offering a discreet approach to the cliff. Her legs burned with the effort, but she didn't slow down. The wind began to blow stronger, bringing with it the smell of rain. Dark clouds moved in the sky, obscuring the moon that until then illuminated her path. Finally, Lisa reached a set of rocks that offered a clear view of the cliff. Crouching behind them, she observed the scene unfolding a few feet away. Her heart almost stopped when she saw Victor Manning in person, his silver-handled cane reflecting the light from the pickup truck's headlights. Thunderbolt was there, his legs tied with thick ropes. Victor's men worked quickly, passing more ropes through a system of pulleys rigged on the edge of the cliff. The black horse tried to struggle, but he was firmly restrained. His eyes, normally so haughty, showed a fear that Lisa had never seen. With trembling fingers, she took out her cell phone and started filming. The battery was at 15% now, but she needed proof. No one would believe her word against Victor Manning's, the most powerful man in the county. As she filmed, she heard his voice, sharp as a razor in the night. "Let's see if you're still so special hanging there, you miserable nag," Victor sneered, watching as his men positioned Thunderbolt closer and closer to the edge. "Soon these ropes will break, and no one will ever know what happened to the precious champion of O'Connell." Lisa's heart was beating so hard she feared they could hear it. Through the phone screen, she continued filming as Victor supervised his men suspending Thunderbolt over the abyss. The magnificent black horse was now completely vulnerable. His legs, tied with ropes that she could see clearly, had been partially cut. "Boss, are you sure you want to do this?" asked one of the henchmen, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "If they find out—" Victor interrupted him with a brusque gesture of his cane. "And who's going to find out? The horse will fall, the ropes will snap, and everyone will think it was an accident. Simple as that." Lisa watched in horror as Victor approached Thunderbolt, who tried in vain to free himself from the bonds. "Do you know how much money I offered for you?" he whispered to the animal. "But that arrogant redneck O'Connell preferred to humiliate me. Now he's going to learn that no one says no to Victor Manning." A loose stone rolled under Lisa's foot, making a soft noise. She held her breath, but it was too late. One of the men turned his head in her direction. "There's someone there!" he shouted, pointing to the rocks where she was hiding. The sound of heavy footsteps chased after her, along with shouts and orders. She could hear Victor yelling to his men, "Don't let anyone escape! Find whoever was spying!" The darkness was both her friend and her enemy. It helped her hide, but it also made it harder to see the path. Lisa knew every stone, every tree of that place. How many afternoons had she spent exploring those trails with her father? Now, that knowledge was her only advantage. She slipped through a narrow passage between two rocks, a shortcut that few knew. "There! I saw movement!" someone shouted behind her. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, passing inches from where she was. Lisa threw herself behind a bush, trying to control her panting breath. Her cell phone slipped out of her pocket with the sudden movement, falling with a thud on the wet ground. Before she could reach it, a bright light illuminated the spot. "I found something!" shouted one of the pursuers. Lisa had no choice. She abandoned the cell phone and kept running. Tears mixed with the rain on her face as she thought of the images she had just lost. Back at the cliff, Victor examined the cell phone found by his men. "A kid," he said with disdain, upon seeing the photo of Lisa with her father on the lock screen. With a calculated movement, he dropped the device and crushed it with his silver-handled cane. "Keep looking, we can't leave any witnesses." Lisa ran further and further into the forest. Her pursuers were starting to fall behind. They didn't know the paths like she did, and the rain made the pursuit even more difficult. But her relief was momentary. Even though she had escaped, she had lost the only proof she had. And Thunderbolt was still there, suspended over the abyss, with ropes that could break at any moment. The girl stopped, leaning against a large tree to catch her breath. Her clothes were soaked, and her muscles ached from the effort of the escape. The rain continued to fall, and another thunderclap lit up the sky. Lisa knew she needed help, but who would believe her? Victor Manning was the most powerful man in the county. He practically owned the town. His donations kept the hospital running, paid the teachers' salaries. It was then that she remembered Mary Smith, the reporter who was at the hospital, who had shown genuine concern for her father. Mary was known for her investigative reports, for not being afraid to confront powerful people. If there was anyone who could help, it was her. But how to find Mary, and more importantly, how much time did Thunderbolt still have before the ropes broke? Lisa looked in the direction of the cliff, where she could see the headlights of the pickup truck shining in the darkness. Her heart told her to go back and try to help Thunderbolt, but her mind knew she needed to find help first. Lisa ran down the main street of the small town, her soaked sneakers making noise on the wet asphalt. The lights of the houses and establishments were almost all off at that time of night, and the rain had driven away any movement from the streets. Her first destination was obvious: the police station. The low building of the police station appeared in front of her, the faded sign illuminated by a single yellowish lamp. Lisa pushed the door open forcefully, entering the reception area where a sleepy policeman looked up from his newspaper. "I need help!" she exclaimed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Victor Manning kidnapped our horse. He's going to kill Thunderbolt." The policeman, Sergeant Miller, adjusted himself in his chair with a tired sigh. "Hold on, kid. Victor Manning, the owner of the Lazy M Ranch? The one who donated the new patrol cars to the precinct?" He shook his head in disbelief. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" "It's true," Lisa insisted, her small hands clenching into fists of frustration. "He drugged my dad, stole Thunderbolt, and took him to the cliff. I saw everything. I filmed it." But her voice faltered as she remembered the destroyed cell phone. "They broke my cell phone, but it's true, please. You have to believe me." The sergeant stood up, placing a comforting hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Look, you're Pete O'Connell's daughter, aren't you? I heard he took ill today and is in the hospital. You must be very worried about your father. It's natural to be imagining things. How about I take you back to the hospital?" Tears of frustration welled up in Lisa's eyes. "I'm not imagining anything. Please, we need to go there now. The ropes are cut. Thunderbolt is going to fall." But she could see in the policeman's eyes that he didn't believe a word she was saying. "Victor Manning is a respectable citizen," said the sergeant firmly. "He does a lot for this town. I can't send a patrol car up there based solely on what a scared kid is saying." He grabbed his coat. "Come on, I'll take you back to the hospital. Your father must be worried." Lisa backed away, shaking her head. "No, I can't go back to the hospital now." Before the sergeant could stop her, she darted out of the precinct, back into the rain. Her thoughts raced as fast as her feet. If the police wouldn't help, where could she go? She ran past the central square, where the fountain continued to spout water in the rainy night. The lights of the church were off, as were those of City Hall. It was then that her eyes fell on the small town hotel, the only place where an out-of-town reporter would stay. The hotel clerk was half asleep when Lisa burst into the lobby, dripping water everywhere. "Mary Smith," she gasped. "I need to talk to reporter Mary Smith. It's an emergency." The man blinked, confused by the sudden appearance of the drenched girl. "Miss Smith? She left a while ago, said she was going to make some calls," he began, but Lisa interrupted him. "What's her room number? Please, it's a matter of life and death." The clerk hesitated, looking at the girl's distraught state. "I can't give out guest information." That's when the hotel door opened, and Mary Smith walked in, folding her umbrella. Her eyes widened upon seeing Lisa. "Goodness, child, what happened? Why aren't you at the hospital?" Lisa ran to her, grabbing her hands in desperation. "Mary, you need to help me. Victor Manning stole Thunderbolt. He took him to the cliff. He's going to make it look like an accident." The words came tumbling out, while Mary held her by the shoulders, her journalistic eyes already shining with that gleam of someone who smells a big story. "Calm down and tell me everything from the beginning," said Mary, guiding Lisa to a sofa in the corner of the lobby. "Don't leave out any details." As the girl narrated the events of the night, Mary's expression became increasingly serious. "You're telling me you're sure that Victor Manning is behind what happened to your father, and that now he's trying to get rid of the horse?" Mary grabbed her notepad, her professional mind already organizing the facts. "But you don't have any proof, correct? The cell phone was destroyed?" Lisa nodded, shivering from cold and anxiety. No one believes me. The police said he's too respectable to do something like that. But I saw it, Mary. I saw everything. And Thunderbolt is there, alone. The ropes could break at any moment. Her voice faltered, broken by emotion. Mary Smith wasn't the kind of journalist who ignored her gut feeling. In 15 years of investigative reporting, she had learned to recognize when a story needed to be told. Looking at the drenched and trembling girl in front of her, she knew she was facing something big. "You said that Victor was filming everything?" asked Mary, her pencil racing across the notepad. Lisa confirmed with a nod. "Yes, one of the men had a camera. Mr. Manning said he wanted to record everything for his own pleasure." The last word came out with disgust. The journalist frowned, connecting the dots in her mind. That makes sense. Victor Manning has always been meticulous in documenting his victories. It's his way of gloating. She closed the notepad decisively. And that may be his undoing. Come on, we don't have time to lose. Mary guided Lisa to her car, parked in front of the hotel. As she drove, she took out her cell phone and began to make calls. "Ryan, it's Mary. I need the film crew now. Yes, I know it's late, but this is big. Find Ben and the broadcast van. Meet me at the entrance to the road to the cliff in 20 minutes. Lisa watched the journalist with a mixture of hope and anxiety. But what if we arrive too late? The ropes, they were partially cut. Mary gripped the steering wheel with determination. We're not going to arrive too late, and I need one more call. She dialed another number. "Captain Johnson, this is Mary Smith. Remember that favor you owe me?" The car snaked along the wet road as Mary explained the situation to someone on the other end of the line. "Exactly. I need a rescue team and an emergency vet. No, I can't wait for a court order. Lives are at risk. Yes, I take full responsibility. And Captain, keep this discreet for now." "Do you think they'll come?" asked Lisa, her voice small against the sound of the rain on the windshield. Mary gave a confident smile. "Captain Johnson works at the State Fire Department. He owes me one since I exposed the corruption that was happening in his battalion. The good men who were wrongly accused were reinstated thanks to my report." The car began to climb the road leading to the cliff. Mary turned off the headlights and continued at a reduced speed. "We don't want them to see us coming," she explained. "We need to assess the situation first. Can you guide us to a point where we can see what's happening without being seen?" Lisa nodded, feeling useful for the first time since all this tragedy had begun. "There's a side trail that uses the rocks as cover. It's where I was when I lost my cell phone." Her voice faltered slightly as she remembered the lost images. "Don't worry about that now," said Mary, parking the car in a discreet location. "If half of what you told me about Victor Manning is true, this isn't the first time he's done something like this. People like him always leave a trail. We just need an opening to expose everything." The two got out of the car in silence. The rain had diminished to a fine drizzle, but the ground was slippery. Lisa guided Mary along the trail with surprising confidence, even in the darkness. Years of playing on that land had etched every stone, every root in her memory. From their vantage point, they could see the headlights still illuminating the cliff area. Thunderbolt remained suspended over the abyss, his rope swaying dangerously in the wind. Victor was there, watching his handiwork with morbid satisfaction, while his men stood guard. "He hasn't left yet," whispered Lisa, her heart clenching at the sight of Thunderbolt's condition. The horse was exhausted, his black coat glistening with rain, his legs still tied. Mary took a small camera from her bag and began to photograph discreetly. "We need to buy time until the rescue team arrives," murmured Mary, "and we have to make sure Victor stays around. If he leaves, he can claim he had nothing to do with it." She looked at Lisa seriously. "Are you sure you can do what we agreed on?" The girl swallowed hard, but nodded with determination. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance they had. Mary squeezed her shoulder gently. Remember, no matter what happens, don't expose yourself. Let me handle Victor. You just need to focus on keeping Thunderbolt calm until the rescue arrives. On the horizon, a new day began to dawn, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. It was a race against time, and they knew it. The ropes that supported Thunderbolt seemed increasingly worn, and the wind showed no signs of letting up. The plan began with a single sound in the early morning, the distant whinny of a horse. Victor Manning raised his head sharply, his eyes scanning the darkness. The sound came again, this time closer, echoing among the rocks of the cliff. Thunderbolt, still suspended over the abyss, responded to the call with a weak neigh. "Go check that out," Victor ordered two of his men, his voice tense. He hadn't planned for there to be other horses nearby. In fact, that area was supposed to be completely deserted. The men hesitated, looking at each other in the dawn's twilight. What they didn't know was that the sound came from a small speaker that Mary had given to Lisa. The girl moved silently among the rocks, playing the recorded sound in different spots, creating the illusion of several horses approaching. It was a simple but effective trick. "Boss," called one of the henchmen, his voice betraying nervousness, "there are more people coming. I heard the sound of an engine down there." Victor tightened his grip on his silver-handled cane. It wasn't in his plans to have witnesses, much less at that crucial moment. In fact, the sound of engines was real. Mary's film crew was arriving, along with the fire department rescue, but they were still too far away. They needed more time. Mary, hidden in her position, began the next phase of the plan. Victor cursed loudly. "Find whoever's doing this! We can't have any records!" His men scattered, the flashlights cutting through the darkness in nervous beams of light. The businessman stood alone near the edge of the cliff, his face contorted into a mask of anger. It was at that moment that Mary made her entrance. She emerged from behind a rock, her professional camera in hand, flash firing directly into Victor's face. "Good morning, Mr. Manning," she said with studied calm. "Would you care to explain what's going on here?" Victor took a step back, momentarily blinded by the flash. "Smith," he growled, recognizing the journalist. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Mary continued to advance, her camera recording every moment. "Interesting you mention property, Mr. Manning. I have a few questions about how exactly you acquired this land." While Mary kept Victor distracted, Lisa silently approached Thunderbolt from the other side. The girl had tied around her waist a thin rope she had found in Mary's car. It wasn't much, but it could help stabilize the horse until the rescue arrived. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Smith," Victor threatened, his voice trembling with fury. "I built this town. Everything and everyone here owes me something." Mary smiled, continuing to photograph. "Including the hospital where Pete O'Connell is hospitalized right now, after someone put a sedative in his drink." Victor's expression changed for a split second, surprise and anger mixing on his face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost some of its previous confidence. Mary took another step forward, her recorder now clearly visible in her hand. "You don't know? Then explain to me why the regional horse show champion is suspended over a 300-foot cliff in the middle of the night?" She paused dramatically. "Or better yet, explain it to the viewers. We're live, Mr. Manning." The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, climbing up the cliff road. Victor's men, who were still looking for the imaginary photographers, began to return, their expressions worried. "Boss, it's the cops!" shouted one of them. "We have to get out of here!" Victor looked at Thunderbolt still suspended over the abyss, and then at Mary with her camera. He made a quick decision. "Let's go! Now!" he ordered, limping towards the pickup truck. His men followed him without hesitation, leaving Thunderbolt behind. "That's right, Mr. Manning, run," taunted Mary, still photographing. "I'm sure the authorities will love to see these images." She knew she needed to keep him around until the rescue arrived. The more he incriminated himself, the better. But Victor was already inside the pickup truck, which sped off into the night, leaving behind only clouds of dust. As soon as Victor's pickup truck disappeared into the darkness, Mary ran to the edge of the cliff. "Lisa, where are you?" she called, her voice tight with worry. The answer came from an unexpected location, a few feet below the edge. Mary felt her heart leap. "For God's sake, don't move, the rescue is coming." But even as she spoke, she could see that the main ropes supporting Thunderbolt were in critical condition. The purposeful cuts made by Victor, added to the weight of the horse and the humidity of the rain, had left the fibers almost at their limit. The sound of sirens was closer now, and powerful headlights began to illuminate the area. Mary's broadcast van was the first to arrive, followed closely by a fire truck. Captain Johnson jumped out of the vehicle even before it came to a complete stop. "Good heavens," he murmured as he saw the scene. Thunderbolt was suspended about 50 feet below the edge of the cliff, his legs tied and his body trapped by ropes that were visibly deteriorating with each passing minute. And further down still, a 12-year-old girl was balancing precariously on the rocks, trying to stabilize the animal. "We need a double rescue," said Mary quickly. "The girl and the horse." The captain was already directing his team, unrolling equipment and setting up a professional pulley system. The veterinarian who accompanied them, Dr. Evans, observed the situation with concern. Lisa, still clinging to her precarious position, nodded. She began to speak to Thunderbolt in a low and gentle voice, as she did every morning in the stable. "Easy, buddy. It's okay. I'm here with you. We're going to get you out of there." The horse neighed softly in response, his ears moving towards the familiar voice. The rescue team worked with speed and precision, setting up a complex system of ropes and pulleys. Ben, Mary's cameraman, documented everything, his experienced hands keeping the camera steady despite the tension of the moment. "Girl, you need to come up first," said one of the firefighters upon reaching Lisa, but she shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving Thunderbolt. He needs me here." The firefighter looked up, receiving a nod of understanding from the captain. Working with Lisa's help, the firefighters began to pass new ropes underneath Thunderbolt's body. It was a delicate job. Any sudden movement could scare the animal or break the old ropes. The veterinarian guided the process from above, ensuring that the positioning of the ropes didn't hurt the horse. "Talk to him," instructed Dr. Evans. "He needs to remain calm." Lisa continued her soft mantra of comforting words, and gradually the firefighters also began to talk to the animal, their voices joining hers in a reassuring chorus. A new sound of ropes breaking shattered everyone's concentration. This time, it was one of Victor's main ropes that gave way completely. Thunderbolt neighed in fear, thrashing in the air. The sudden movement caused Lisa to momentarily lose her footing on the rock. "Lisa!" shouted Mary, her heart stopping for an instant. But the girl had already recovered, her small hands finding a new ledge to hold onto. She immediately returned to talking to Thunderbolt, her voice even softer and more determined. The dawn began to paint the sky with rosy hues when the last old rope was removed. Thunderbolt was now supported only by the new rescue system, safer and more resistant. But the hardest part was yet to come. It was necessary to hoist the horse back to the surface without him panicking. "We're going to do this in stages," explained Captain Johnson. "First, we need to completely stabilize the animal. Then, we start the climb inch by inch." He looked at Lisa, still hanging on the rocks next to Thunderbolt. "You ready, kiddo?" Lisa nodded, her expression determined despite the visible fatigue on her face. Her small hands were scratched and dirty, but she showed no intention of giving up. "I'm ready." Thunderbolt is too, aren't you, buddy? The horse responded with a soft neigh, as if he understood. Dr. Evans supervised everything closely. The important thing is to keep the animal calm. Any agitation at this point can be disastrous. He turned to his medical bag. I have a mild sedative here, but I'd rather not use it if it's not absolutely necessary. The stress is already too great. The first rays of sun began to illuminate the cliff when the hoisting operation began. The pulleys began to turn slowly, driven by a hydraulic system on the fire truck. Inch by inch, Thunderbolt began to rise. Mary continued filming, her camera capturing every moment of the rescue. The broadcast team had managed to establish a live link, and now images of the dramatic rescue began to be broadcast across the country. The story of the courageous girl and her horse was moving thousands of viewers. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind shook the cables. Thunderbolt neighed in fright, his hooves flailing in the air. The sudden movement made the entire rope system swing dangerously. "Hold on!" shouted Captain Johnson. "Keep the tension constant!" Lisa almost lost her grip on the rocks, but managed to hold on. Her heart was racing, but her voice remained steady. "Shh! It's okay, Thunderbolt. I'm here. Nothing bad is going to happen." Gradually, the horse calmed down again, responding to the familiar voice. The sun was completely above the horizon when Thunderbolt finally reached ground level. With a final coordinated effort, the rescue team pulled the horse to the safety of solid ground. Lisa was hoisted up soon after, her legs trembling when she finally stepped on solid ground. Immediately, she ran to hug Thunderbolt's neck. The horse, still shaky and exhausted, lowered his head to touch her with his muzzle. It was a scene of pure emotion. The girl and the horse, finally safe, united by an ordeal that only strengthened their special bond even more. Dr. Evans approached to examine Thunderbolt. He's dehydrated and exhausted, but doesn't seem to have any serious injuries. He's an exceptionally strong animal. He began to untie the last ropes that still bound the horse's legs. "We'll need special care in the coming days, but he'll make a full recovery." Mary put away her camera and approached Lisa, wrapping the girl in a tight hug. "You were amazing," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved his life. And not only that, we got all the evidence we needed against Victor Manning." A convoy of police cars climbed the cliff road, sirens blaring. The first car stopped, and a tall man wearing an impeccable suit got out. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," he introduced himself, showing his badge. "We received the images from the live broadcast. We need to hear everything about Victor Manning." Lisa barely paid attention to the activity around her. Sitting in the grass next to Thunderbolt, she only stroked the horse's neck, whispering words of affection. The nightmare was over, but something told her that the story wasn't complete yet. The morning sun was already high when Dr. Evans finished examining Thunderbolt in the makeshift stable that the firefighters had set up. The veterinarian made notes on his clipboard, while Lisa, who refused to leave the horse's side, watched attentively every movement he made. "Considering everything he's been through, he's in surprisingly good condition," said the veterinarian, putting away his instruments. "Some scratches on his legs where the ropes were tied, slight dehydration, and of course, exhaustion, but nothing that good care and rest won't fix." He smiled at Lisa. "You have a very resilient champion here." Mary entered the stable at that moment, accompanied by the FBI agent who had introduced himself as Agent Harding. The man carried a thick folder under his arm and had a serious expression on his face. Lisa nodded, her hands still stroking Thunderbolt's neck. "I saw everything. Mr. Manning was celebrating, saying that he was finally going to get revenge on my dad." She paused, remembering something. "He also talked about some documents that my dad discovered a long time ago." The agent leaned forward, interested. "What documents would those be?" Lisa frowned, trying to remember the exact words. Something about land deeds. It was when my dad still worked for him. Mr. Manning got furious when Dad threatened to report him. And there's more, continued Lisa, her voice gaining strength. They were filming everything. One of the men had a professional camera, recording every moment. Mr. Manning made sure to record everything, said he wanted to keep it as a souvenir. The agent made some quick notes. That's consistent with his profile. In previous investigations, we always found meticulous records of his activities. It's like he collects his own evils. He turned to Mary. The images you broadcast live will be fundamental to the process. Near the edge, partially hidden among the rocks, was a small rectangular black object. The agent put on gloves before picking it up. A waterproof camera, he said, examining the device. Very small, easily goes unnoticed. The agent handed the camera to a technician who had just arrived. We need to check if it still works, if the images have been preserved. He turned to Lisa. Your father seems to be a very cautious man. Tears of relief welled up in the girl's eyes. She looked at Thunderbolt, torn between wanting to see her father and not wanting to leave the horse alone. Dr. Evans noticed her hesitation. You can go without worry, he said gently. I'll stay here taking care of him. I promise not to leave his side for a minute. And I will personally escort you to the hospital, added the agent. I really need to talk to your father as soon as he's able. He paused significantly. And we also need to ensure that Victor Manning doesn't try any more funny business. The hospital room was silent, except for the rhythmic beep of the monitors when Lisa entered, accompanied by Mary and Agent Harding. Pete O'Connell was sitting in bed, still pale but with alert eyes. When he saw his daughter, his face lit up with a smile. The doctors told me about the sedative, he said, his voice hoarse, but no one could tell me. He looked at Mary and the agent, concern evident on his face. Thunderbolt? Is he? Lisa pulled back slightly, smiling through her tears. He's okay, Dad. We managed to save him. She began to tell the whole story, the discovery of Victor's plan, her escape through the forest, the meeting with Mary, the dramatic rescue. Pete listened to everything with a mixture of pride and horror, his hands squeezing his daughter's. My God, Lisa, he whispered when she finished. You could have gotten hurt or worse. Mary stepped forward, intervening gently. Your daughter is a hero, Mr. O'Connell. Without her, we wouldn't have arrived in time. And now, thanks to her, we have much more than just the rescue of Thunderbolt to show. Agent Harding cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Mr. O'Connell, we found the camera that you usually put on Thunderbolt's harness. He paused significantly. Our experts have just recovered the images. You won't believe what we have here. He took a tablet from the folder and positioned it where everyone could see. The video began to play, showing first normal scenes from the championship. Thunderbolt galloping, the award ceremony, the celebration. Then the image changed abruptly to the moment of the kidnapping in the stable. The small camera had captured everything, Victor's men overpowering the horse, the transport to the cliff, and most importantly, Victor Manning boasting about his crimes. Think your owner is so smart, he said in the video, his voice dripping with venom. He should have kept quiet when he discovered those deeds. Now he's going to lose everything, just like everyone else who tried to stand up to me. Pete closed his eyes for a moment, old memories returning to the surface. I found the evidence by chance, he explained to the agent. Documents showing how he had forged deeds, threatened families, bribed officials. When I confronted him, he shook his head. He fired me on the spot and started a campaign to destroy me. But you had kept copies of these documents? Asked the agent, his eyes gleaming with professional interest. Pete nodded slowly. In the lining of the old barn, on my father-in-law's ranch. I never had the courage to use them. Victor had a lot of power, knew a lot of important people. I was afraid of what could happen to my family. Mary was writing everything down quickly in her notepad, and now we have his confession on video, connecting all the dots. She smiled, not to mention the live images of the rescue, which are already circulating on every news channel. Victor Manning has no way to escape now. The agent put away the tablet. I'm going to need those documents, Mr. O'Connell, and your complete statement when you're stronger. But don't worry, Victor Manning is already wanted. We've frozen his accounts. His assets are under investigation. He's not going to hurt anyone anymore. Lisa, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. So it's over? Can we go home? Thunderbolt is waiting? Pete smiled, stroking his daughter's face. Almost over, my love. We still have a lot of work ahead, but the worst is over. Mary put away her notepad. The story doesn't end here, she said, her journalistic instinct already anticipating the developments. When those documents come to light, many families will be able to recover their land. It will be a new beginning for many people. A young police officer stuck his head into the room. Agent Harding, they just located Victor Manning. You won't believe where he tried to hide. The agent stood up quickly. Excuse me, he said, following the officer out of the room. Pete hugged Lisa again, tighter this time. My courageous daughter, he whispered. You didn't just save Thunderbolt today. You saved an entire community. Lisa smiled against her father's chest, feeling for the first time the weight of everything that had happened transform into something lighter, more hopeful. The news about Victor Manning's location spread quickly throughout the small town. The powerful rancher had been found trying to escape in his own private plane, hidden in a clandestine hangar in the back of his ranch. The irony was not lost on anyone. The man who was so proud of his power was trying to escape like a common fugitive. As events unfolded, Pete was discharged from the hospital later that afternoon. Dr. Evans had brought Thunderbolt to wait for him at the entrance, a surprise organized by Lisa. The reunion between the man and his horse moved even the most experienced nurses. "My champion," murmured Pete, hugging Thunderbolt's neck as the horse snorted softly, recognizing his owner. "You're a warrior too, aren't you?" Lisa watched the scene with tears in her eyes, feeling that everything was finally falling back into place. Mary appeared running, her notepad in hand as always. "You have to see this," she said, breathless. "They're doing a search on Victor's mansion. They found a secret archive with decades of records. He documented everything, every threat, every bribe, every stolen land." "Typical of him," commented Pete, shaking his head. "Victor was always obsessed with keeping records of his triumphs. It was as if he needed to prove to himself his own power." He paused, his face growing serious. "But now that habit will be his undoing." Agent Harding arrived at that moment, accompanied by 2 FBI agents. "Mr. O'Connell, we need you to come with us to the Lazy M Ranch. We're gathering all the families who were harmed by Victor Manning. It's time to start the restitution process." Pete, Lisa, and Thunderbolt were greeted with applause when they arrived. Many there remembered when Pete was a foreman, how he always tried to help those in need, even under Victor's cruel orders. It was then that a murmur began to spread through the crowd. An FBI patrol car approached, and in the back seat, handcuffed and with his face contorted in anger, was Victor Manning. The man who once caused fear now seemed small, diminished. "You don't understand, O'Connell," he said, his voice trembling with contained rage. "I built all this. I transformed this backward area into something important. These people." He gestured to the crowd with his handcuffed hands. "They didn't know how to manage their land. I gave this place a purpose." Pete looked at his former boss with a mixture of pity and determination. "No, Victor, you didn't build anything. You stole, threatened, and destroyed. The only thing you built was your own prison. made of lies and cruelty. Victor was taken inside the mansion, where he would give his first official statement. The families began to be called one by one to identify their former properties in the recovered documents. It was the beginning of a long process of justice and restitution. A week after Victor Manning's arrest, the area was undergoing a surprising transformation. What was once an empire built on lies began to fragment into small pieces of hope. Each family that recovered their land brought with them long-held dreams, ready to finally flourish. In the old headquarters of the Lazy M Ranch, now transformed into a temporary administrative center, Pete assisted in the process of land redistribution. His knowledge of the region and the families was instrumental in ensuring that everyone recovered exactly what they had lost. Mr. O'Connell, called Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman with white hair who had lost her property 15 years ago. Remember when you tried to warn us about the forged documents? If we had believed you back then. Pete smiled gently, taking the woman's calloused hands between his own. The important thing is that everything is being corrected now, Mrs. Henderson, and this time, no one will take you off your land. He picked up a folder on the table. Look, here's the original deed to your property. I kept a copy all these years, waiting for this moment. Lisa, who helped organize the documents, proudly watched her father's work. In 1 week, she had learned more about compassion and justice than in all her 12 years of life. Each story she heard, each hug of gratitude she witnessed, reinforced her understanding of what really mattered. Mary Smith remained in town, now working on a series of special reports about the case. This story goes far beyond Victor Manning, she explained to Lisa during one of her breaks. It's about how power can corrupt, but also about how the truth, even if it takes time, always finds its way. In the stable attached to the headquarters, Thunderbolt fully recovered from his ordeal. Dr. Evans, who had decided to stay in the area longer, was impressed with the animal's recovery. It's as if he knew he needed to stay strong to inspire people, commented the veterinarian, watching the horse neigh happily at a group of children passing by. Victor's land was being divided according to the original records, but a significant portion still remained, the one he had actually inherited from his father. Agent Harding brought a proposal that surprised everyone, transforming that area into an agricultural cooperative. The idea is that the families who recovered their land can have a common space to share resources, knowledge, and equipment, he explained during a meeting with the community, transforming the symbol of oppression into a center of collaboration and mutual growth. Pete was unanimously chosen to lead the cooperative project. His experience as a foreman, combined with his proven integrity, made him the ideal candidate. But with one condition, he said, when accepting the position. I want part of the land to be dedicated to raising horses, to give opportunity to other young talents like Thunderbolt. The proposal was met with enthusiasm, especially after Mary suggested including an equine therapy program for children with special needs. We can transform the place that brought so much suffering into a source of healing and joy, she said, already planning a report on the project. Lisa, of course, was radiant with the idea. Can I help train the horses, Dad? Thunderbolt can teach the others. Pete laughed, hugging his daughter. Of course you can, my little one. You've more than proven that you have a special gift with them. Agent Harding, in one of his last visits before returning to the capital, brought news that capped off that week of transformations. Victor Manning had confessed to all his crimes in an attempt to reduce his sentence. 6 months had passed since the night of Thunderbolt's rescue. The old Lazy M Ranch, now called the New Hope Cooperative, was unrecognizable. Where once there were high fences and security cameras, now there were open gates and colorful signs indicating the various community projects. The old mansion had been transformed into a training and education center where families shared knowledge about sustainable agriculture and animal husbandry. The stable, completely renovated, housed not only Thunderbolt, but also a growing family of horses dedicated to the equine therapy project. On that sunny Sunday morning, a small crowd gathered around the training track. It was presentation day for the first results of the equine therapy program, and Lisa, now 13 years old, was at the center of it all, gently guiding a horse carrying a girl with Down syndrome. "That's it, Sophia," encouraged Lisa, walking alongside the horse. "You're doing great." The girl on the horse smiled radiantly, her hands holding the reins with newfound confidence. In the stands, parents and therapists applauded each small achievement. Pete watched the scene with tears of pride in his eyes. Beside him, Dr. Evans made notes on the patient's progress. "Your daughter has a special gift," commented the veterinarian. "The way she connects the children with the horses, it's a rare thing to see." Mary Smith was also present, her camera capturing moments for her latest report, New Hope: How a Community Rebuilt Itself Through the Love of Horses. Her articles about the transformation of the region had won journalism awards and, more importantly, inspired changes in other communities across the country. Thunderbolt, now a respected patriarch of the stable, grazed peacefully in a nearby paddock. His neck still sported the champion ribbon from the last regional tournament, but now he had an even nobler mission: to be the first teacher for the younger horses in the equine therapy program. After the presentation, while the families gathered for a community potluck, Lisa led Sophia to Thunderbolt. "Want to know a secret?" she said to the girl. "It was this horse who changed everything. He taught us that sometimes we need to be very brave, even when we're scared." Sophia reached out to stroke Thunderbolt's muzzle. "He's a hero," she said in her sweet voice. Lisa smiled, remembering that terrible night on the cliff. "Yes, he is. And you know what the best kind of hero is? The one who helps other people discover the hero inside themselves." On the other side of the pasture, Mrs. Henderson proudly showed off her first corn harvest to a group of visitors. Other families had transformed their recovered lands into thriving small farms, and the cooperative ensured that everyone had access to equipment and technical support. Agent Harding, who occasionally visited the region, was present on that special day. "You know," he said during the potluck, "when we arrested Victor Manning, we thought we were just doing justice. But you transformed justice into something much bigger. You transformed it into hope." In the afternoon, as the sun began to set, Lisa and her father rode Thunderbolt for a special ride. It was a ritual they had created, to visit the cliff every month, not to remember the danger, but to celebrate the change. "Dad," said Lisa as they watched the horizon, "do you think we'll ever forget everything that happened?" Pete hugged his daughter, sitting in front of him on the saddle. "We shouldn't forget, my little one, but we can choose how to remember. Look around. Where there was fear, now there is hope. Where there was division, there is unity." Thunderbolt neighed softly as if in agreement. On the horizon, the sun tinged the sky with vibrant colors, promising a new dawn. The small town that once lived under the shadow of fear now shone with its own light, built on foundations of courage, compassion, and the incredible ability to transform pain into healing. "Let's go home?" asked Pete. Lisa nodded, taking one last look at the cliff. The place that almost witnessed a tragedy now told a different story. A story of how love, courage, and truth can change not only one life, but an entire community. Thunderbolt turned gently, his hooves marking a peaceful rhythm on the packed earth. On his back, father and daughter returned home, carrying not only the memories of the past, but mainly the promises of the future. A future built on the strength of the bonds that unite people and animals, on the courage of a girl who didn't give up, and on the certainty that, even in the darkest nights, there is always a path to the light.